street was quiet enough that you could hear the little girl crying before you could see her. She stood at the edge of the cracked sidewalk, both arms wrapped around a golden retriever, almost as big as she was, her chin buried in its fur. Her shoes had no laces. Her dress was too thin for the morning chill. Her name was Lily. She was 8 years old, and the dog minus a gentle, grey-muzzled retriever named Duke minus was the last thing her father had ever given her. The man with the leash was Gerald Holt, her landlord, a man who owned half the buildings on that block and believed that ownership gave him the right to take whatever he pleased. He had come that morning with a notice and a smirk. Lily's mother, Sarah, was 3 weeks behind on rent. Holt had decided that Duke minus registered as a service animal under her late husband's name, minus now belonged to him. He called it a clause in the lease. He called it business. Please, Lily sobbed, her fingers white around Duke's collar. He was my daddy's. Please don't take him. If you believe that kindness still exists in this world, minus that strangers can become heroes when it matters. Most minus, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. What happened next on that sidewalk is something no one who witnessed it ever forgot. That is, when the low rumble started. It came slowly at first, like distant thunder on a dry day. Then louder. Then 4 motorcycles turned. The corner onto Birch Street, their chrome catching the pale morning light. The Iron Road Brotherhood minus, not the kind of men people waved at, but the kind people quietly moved aside for. They were heading to a memorial ride. Every year, on the same date, they rode in honor of brothers they had lost. Today was one of those days. The lead rider, a broad man named Cole, slowed when he saw the little girl. He didn't know why he stopped. He just did. He swung off his bike, boots heavy on the asphalt, and walked toward her with a kind of calm that came from a man who had seen too much of the world to be rattled by any of it. "Hey," he said softly, dropping to one knee. "What is going on, little one?" Lily looked up at him, minus this giant of a man with tattoos on his neck and grief stitched into every line of his face. And she didn't flinch. She just pointed at Duke. "Please don't let them take my dog, sir." Cole reached out and steadied the dog, who leaned into him immediately, tail still, eyes soft and trusting the way only old dogs know how to be. That is when he saw it. Around Duke's neck, half hidden beneath his fur, hung a military medal on a worn leather cord. Not a replica, not a decoration, a real silver star, minus the kind earned in places most people never spoke about. Cole's hand went still. He turned the medal over slowly. On the back in small stamped letters, Sergeant James Rourke, 3rd Battalion, Fort Bragg. The world seemed to stop. Cole stood up slowly, and for the first time Holt noticed the look on his face. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. "Recognition. Where did this dog come from?" Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily answered without hesitation. "From my daddy. He gave Duke to me before he went away. He never came home." Cole turned to his brothers, who had now gathered behind him in silence. One of them, an older rider named Dutch, removed his helmet. His jaw tightened. James Rourke had been their brother, not by blood, but by the bond that forms between men who ride together, grieve together, and carry each other's names through the years. James had left the club to serve his country. They had attended his funeral with flags folded against their chests, and now here was his daughter on a cracked sidewalk, crying over the only piece of him she had left. Cole turned to Gerald Holt. Holt was still holding the leash, though his smirk had disappeared somewhere in the last 60 seconds. He squared his shoulders, trying to recover the authority of a man used to getting what he wanted. "This is a legal matter," he started. "The lease clearly states, sir." "Sir," Cole's voice was quiet, completely quiet. "You are standing in front of a fallen soldier's daughter, holding his dog on the day we ride to honor his memory." He let that sit for a moment. "I am going to ask you to hand me that leash, and I am going to ask you only once." The street had gone completely still. Neighbors had appeared on their porches. A woman across the road had her hand over her mouth. Holt looked at the 4 men behind Cole. He looked at Dutch, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but whose eyes said everything that needed to be said. He dropped the leash. Duke walked immediately to Lily, who buried her face in his fur and didn't say a word. But Cole wasn't finished. He asked Lily to bring him inside. He asked to meet her mother, Sarah minus still pale and shaking from the morning's confrontation. Cole sat across from her at the kitchen table, Duke at his feet, and spoke quietly for a long time. He told her about James, about the rides they'd taken together years ago, before James traded his vest for a uniform. About the last letter, James had written minus a letter they'd kept folded in the clubhouse for 3 years, not knowing who to give it to. Sarah's hands trembled as she read it. In it, James had written, "If anything happens to me, find my brothers. They'll take care of my girls. That is just who they are." Cole looked at Sarah for a long moment, then at Lily, who had fallen asleep against Duke on the kitchen floor, one hand curled around his medal. He was right, Cole said simply. Within a week, the Iron Road Brotherhood had done what they always did when one of their own needed help. Minus they showed up. A lawyer in the club reviewed Sarah's lease and found 3 violations Holt had committed. The eviction was cancelled. The back rent was quietly covered by a collection taken up at the next chapter meeting, no names attached. Gerald Holt received a formal complaint with the City Housing Authority. He did not return to Birch Street. On the day of the memorial ride, a small figure sat on the back of Cole's motorcycle, a helmet far too big for her head, a golden retriever waiting patiently at the curb below. Lily held a small flag as they rode. In her other hand, she held the silver star, warm from her palm. The road stretched out long and golden in the afternoon light, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like James Rourke was riding with them. If this story reminded you that loyalty never truly dies, minus that the people we love leave echoes in the world long after they're gone, minus please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to believe in kindness today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever had a stranger show up for you at exactly the right moment? Your story might be the one that gives someone else hope, because sometimes the bravest thing in the world isn't a medal on a ribbon. It is an 8-year-old girl who refuses to let go.